Hello everybody. Today I thought we'd talk about the Behringer 204 HD audio interface. As a bunch of you know, I've recently become a big fan of audio interfaces. For those that don't know, audio interfaces are actually designed for studio type applications or for people who are producing music who want inputs and outputs and flexibility about how to get sound from instruments, microphones and other things into computers for editing purposes. But they also make a very good external sound card, in my opinion, with a lot of advantages over some of the more computer-based audio products that you can buy. So I use one as a sound card and it suits all my needs. But before we leave the Behringer website, let's just say it's got a good website with good support, updated drivers, and I actually had to use the support to help me get the device set up, and they were pretty responsive. So full marks really in terms of, for a relatively cheap device, having regular firmware and software updates and good support in place. So definitely a positive to take away from this video. Let's talk through the inputs and outputs, and by the way, it's nowhere near as complicated as it first seems. Very straightforward really. Input stuff on the left hand side, output on the right. So you can see you've got input 1 and input 2. That's where you connect a microphone. It supports 48-volt phantom power. You could connect a musical instrument. Each input has its own little gain control, a line and instrument, which is basically a boost, and pad, which is basically a kind of reduction in input signal. And then on the output side, you've got a main output knob, you've got a stereo mono button and a mix button that goes with the monitor. And the monitor AB allows you to listen directly to the input, not through your audio interface and computer. And then you've got a dedicated headphone amp with its own independent volume control and a headphone out. And that's basically it. So essentially, it's basically like a glorified sound card, a lot like the panel that you find on most computers with an inputs and outputs, just a bit more fancy. And what we'll do is we'll switch around to the back now and have a look and see how you connect it up to your computer and other stuff like that. Okay, so you can see the USB line there connected in at the far left. The MIDI in and out ports are for MIDI devices, typically things like keyboards and kind of editing devices that you can add using that MIDI interface. You can see it's got a 48-volt power switch on the back, which you can use to power certain things, sometimes called phantom power, through the input. Some things require power, typically some microphones in particular. And then you've got a series of outputs, but the one that you really need to worry about is the main output, left and right. And those 1/4 inch outputs go on a left and right stereo basis to whatever you want to go to, your speakers, your amplifier. And this is one of the key benefits that I appreciate of having an audio interface on your desk, is the independent control of the volume of your speakers and the volume of your headphones, with physical controls on your desk so that you can adjust the volume up and down of either independently together and never have to worry about switching between them or using software controls and other things on your PC and struggling with the software and the changeover and the plug in and out activation. Fantastic. So this means that whether or not you ever even plug an instrument into your audio interface, you've got independent control over the inputs and outputs to your PC without messing around inside the software interface, and with proper knobs to turn for gain, input, output volume, headphone volume, and system volume. I think you should probably, if you are ever planning to use an instrument, buy the 204 HD over the 202 HD and spend the extra 20 bucks. And that's because of the output stage and the direct monitoring on this device. You'll notice that the 204 HD has a stereo mono button on the output. And if you're playing a mono instrument, if you don't have that button, when you're doing direct monitoring, the sound will come out of one ear, and that will drive you mad. A good reason to buy the 204 over the 202 HD, and the reason why I upgraded my 202 that I initially bought to a 204 shortly afterwards. So in putting together a couple of pluses and minuses and deciding on whether I think I would recommend the Behringer 204 HD, I thought I would make a comparison with my daily driver audio interface on my main PC, which is currently the Focusrite 2i2 that I have made another video about, a device with almost identical functionality. The 204HD is way cheaper than the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, and performance-wise, in terms of audio input and output quality, to me, the difference is not discernible to me. In fact, I think my view is that the headphone amp on the 204HD is actually less noisy and sounds better. I also really like the fact that they've got relatively decent support, which for a cheap device is a very good thing. I had to use the support. Both devices, actually, both the Focusrite and the Behringer, are quite fussy about the way in which you install the drivers. But Behringer's support helped me out very quickly when I sent a request into them to understand what I needed to do to make it work properly. And as a result, I think looking at the marketplace for devices like the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, the Behringer 204HD, it's a relatively limited number of options. To me, the Behringer 204HD seems like outstanding value. I use both devices on a daily basis and have been doing so for some months now. I see no downside to the 204HD, and considering it's so much cheaper than the Focusrite 2i2, I think it's the smart choice and definitely comes with my recommendation. Okay guys, thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next one.